Well, Dan, thank you for joining me today and inviting us to spend some time together talking about leadership. I know you have a new ebook coming out about leadership and how emotional intelligence supports effective leadership. What I did is I asked people in our LinkedIn group what they would like me to ask you. And I think it's a reflection of the way things are in the world today. It struck me that many of the questions that people asked had to do with ethics and behavior and supporting leaders to show up as role models worth following. And so the first question that I wanted to ask you is, do you see that the way things are going in the world today is creating a new type of leadership necessity? Is the current change in the environment changing what we need from leaders?
I think that the current changes, the current global crises that we're going through, both in the economy generally and in terms of lapses in ethics among leaders, call for a new emphasis in leadership. I don't think it's an entirely new kind. In fact, I think it's a very old, maybe the primal role of leadership. And that is twofold. One is to be a leader we can trust, a leader for whom there's no gap between espoused actions, espoused values and actions. And the second is a leader who helps us feel safe and secure. And as John Bowlby, the British psychoanalyst, pointed out, these are the functions of a good parent. I mean, this is a very archetypical role in our psyche. It's the person you can turn to when you're troubled, who will make you feel safe. It's the person who you can assume will be there for you, whom you can trust, who won't betray you. Right now, there's a huge crisis of one leader after another who turned out to be embezzling or Madoff or in one way or another involved in unethical behavior. So I think what we need to do, Josh, is to emphasize what have always been aspects of leadership, but highlight a side of leadership that is more important than ever right now. What do you think?
Well, I agree with you that it's always been part of leadership, and that it's maybe. I like the quote from Martin Luther King, which is something like, "The true measure of man is not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and uncertainty." I think I just butchered the quote, but it's along those lines. And my perception is that in times like this, we find out who really is a leader, and that can be very uncomfortable. Uh, I also think probably the last, I don't know, 100 years or more, there's been a sort of trend towards thinking about leadership and business in a very transactional way. And I think what we're seeing right now is an urgency to reaffirm the relational part of leadership. And I think that's part of the reason why emotional intelligence is so critical, because that's like the connective force uh, for leaders and people.
Josh, I really like your point about the importance of the relational aspect of leadership. I mean, leadership is in essence a relationship art,
Mm.
and that gets lost track of. But in order to be that kind of leader, it's both. It takes two things. One side of it is relational.
Mm-hmm.
The other side has to do with self-mastery, about leading yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That is, being an ethical person
Mm-hmm.
is about you aligning your actions with your beliefs. And that's a private act. But it's a private act that has a public face
Yeah.
because you are a leader and people are looking to you. People are watching you. People want to see, can we trust this guy? Is this woman really living up to, the values she espouses? And the relational part also has to do with being that safe haven for people in troubled times. That's really about empathy. It's about attuning. It's about caring. And even if you can't change things, listening people out, caring about and being open to their feelings, and taking that in too as part of the information, part of your data set.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I mean, trust is a feeling, right? And it's a feeling that tells us, yeah, I'm gonna move forward. Or distrust is a feeling saying, no, I've got to protect. And as we're dealing with this kind of change, I mean, it seems like trust is almost like the speed governor on the leadership relationship. You know, I want to go somewhere. Are you guys coming? The answer is, well, how much trust is there?
Josh, there's some thought in the leadership world that the action today is all about trust for leaders. Because if people can no longer trust you, if they feel betrayed, it takes enormous effort and time to rebuild trust. Trust is an invaluable commodity for any
Yeah.
leader.
Well, that really segues nicely to one of the questions from one of the group members. Sanjoli Chimney asked this question. And in her words, you know, there's so many leaders who have, quote, made a hash of things recently. And in that context, you know, we have people in organizations all over the world looking at those role models and saying, well, you know, they're not very emotionally intelligent. Why should I be? And maybe even can I be? How do we develop emotionally intelligent leaders in a context that is, you know, arguably not that intelligent or emotionally intelligent?
I think that India, for example, is a
Yeah.
graphic case in point of a culture and an organizational culture which is going through an upheaval around trust in leaders and mistrust of leaders. And it's in the air politically, it's in the air organizationally. One of the outstanding success stories in India was just arrested for overstepping many lines in climbing his way to success. And it's not isolated to India. It's quite pervasive in many parts of the world. Because things are becoming more transparent, because of social media, because of hacking, because of WikiLeaks, leaders can't hide anymore. They can't assume, as they have actually for centuries, that their untrustworthy acts would stay behind the curtain there. And so leaders, in a way, are more naked than ever. And I think that this is going to have long-term a very beneficial effect in that the kinds of cozy dealings and so on that had been taken for granted in so many organizations and in so many governments and so on will no longer be tolerated. I was at a meeting, I went to the World Economic Forum in Davos last year, and I was on a meeting dealing with the issue of transparency and how it's going to affect leadership and government and organizations. And there are two norms that are changing so rapidly that heads are spinning. One
Right.
is the norm of what's disclosed and what's not. What's a secret anymore?
Not much.
It's all been posted on the web. And so this so this creates a new milieu for leadership where ethics is sine qua non, where it's a must-have, not a nice-to-have. Then there's a question of how do you develop leaders for that future. And I think that the mechanisms actually are in place. I know that business schools today, for example, with MBAs are putting enormous focus on ethics and ethical questions. I was giving a seminar for the top leaders at a company called BlackRock. They're the biggest money management firm in the world. They manage pensions for people mainly. And they were saying that they're just no longer interested in the applicants who are there because this is where the big bucks are. They want applicants who will think about and be concerned about the widows and firemen whose futures they're managing, essentially. They want people, in other words, who aren't self-absorbed, focused on I, me, my career, climbing the ladder, my success, my salary. They want people and they want leaders for the future who are focused on the people they're serving. So I think we'll hear more and more about the service aspect of leadership, the service. It's not just shareholder value, it's stakeholders. It's not one of the areas I've been very concerned with this has to do with the ecological impacts of business as usual. This is what's called the Anthropocene age, the first geological era in which the activities of one species, that is us, is systematically eroding the capacities of the 8 global systems that support life. And it's built into everything we do and everything we buy and everything we make. A part of now that there's a science to contract the impacts of, your laptop, your iPod, your shirt, your blouse, your anything, we see that there's nothing man-made that doesn't have negative side effects. But now we can create a metric for that. In other words, we can make those impacts transparent for the first time. And to the extent that this shifts people's decisions toward less destructive impacts and toward the better processes and platforms and so on, we'll see a huge change in supply chain and what's available to us, which will favor better, more ecologically sound practices and so on. Right now it's quite sporadic, but as this becomes systemic, it will create a market force that will do this. And I think that's a parallel of what's going to be happening and what we're in the process of with leadership. And with thinking about, well, what are the qualities that we need in selecting people, in promoting people, in grooming people, in development? And the question of how do you support someone in being an ethical leader is going to be more and more prominent.
I look at clients, I might be speaking with a group of directors or VPs, and they might say to me, well, yes, I believe in this, and trust is absolutely important and relationship is absolutely important, but ultimately, that's not what the CEO is interested in, and it's not ultimately not what and then I recently was talking to a group of CEOs, and they said the same thing. It's like, well, yes, this is what we believe in, this is what I want, but it's not what our owners want. And somehow it seems like we have this deeply entrenched focus on short-term profits,
which creates a disconnect.
My hope is that the people that we're working with, as they are more conscious, as they have more skills, as they know other ways of engaging with people and other ways of evaluating their success, as they move up, maybe that creates opportunity for them to create different kinds of cultures. But I think what we really need when I think about leaders, I guess I'm not just talking about people at the top of the organization. I'm thinking about people who say, you know what, okay, so that's what these people are pressuring me to do, but that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to stand up for the values that we have up on the wall, even if the people above me are not doing that. And that's a kind of courageous leadership.
And of course, when I say leader, I mean leadership is distributed at every level. Yeah. Any of us, no matter what our ostensible role or position is, can be a leader in one context or another. And what you say reminds me of a study that was done on whistleblowers, people who saw something unethical or illegal going on and didn't just keep quiet and go along to get along, but spoke up and spoke out in a consequential way. And what was fascinating was every one of them did so because they had a deep commitment to the ethics and mission of the organization, and they felt they were being violated. So what we need are more leaders at every level who act on those values and keep everyone else straight. And I really think, even though there are lots of executives who are caught in this trap of, well, we've got to make our numbers this quarter, and no matter what it takes, that's what we're going to do. I think that's shooting an organization in its foot in the long run, and that
Hmm.
is going to be the companies that are trustworthy, that are going to be the long-term survivors. And then you asked, what's the role of emotional intelligence in this? I mean, in the model I work with,
Okay.
which my new book, which by the way is also a book. It's not just digital. Um, at any
Hmm.
rate, uh,
Yeah.
in one of the chapters there, I go into the role of self-awareness in as an ethical rudder. I believe that there are four aspects of emotional intelligence: it's self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, and social skills. And I think your model is more or less the same. You use different language, but that's kind of a generic format. But it's in the self-awareness domain.
Yeah.
How we lead ourselves is based on how well we know ourselves. And part of knowing ourselves is getting in touch with the inner rudder of, how we answer the question, is what I'm about to do in keeping with my sense of ethics, morals, life purpose, meaning, goals, and so on. And that's not an answer that we get,
Yeah.
in some formulaic uh, slogan that we've memorized
Yeah.
from somewhere. We get it in our gut. And it's tuning in at that level. It's an emotional reading, feels right, doesn't feel right. Then we put it in words.
Harut
Follow.
Nersessian had asked specifically about that and saying, do emotions help us make more ethical decisions? And I think, as you described, that self-knowledge, I have a feeling, and that feeling is there for a reason. And it's a signal, and it's a signal of opportunity and threat. And I've heard you say, like the basal ganglia doesn't hold up a sign to us saying, good decision, bad decision. It's that kind of felt sense. But the emotion is a message from me to me. How do we get better at tuning into that message?
You mentioned the basal ganglia. That's part of this deeply
Mm-hmm.
unconscious subcortical brain circuitry that, as we go through life, gathers information for us. It's when I said
Mm.
that really worked well. When I did that, that bombed, and so on. It collects decision rules, and it also is
Mm.
intertwined with circuitry that's described by Sam Harris in his book, The Moral Landscape, which is essential for harboring our sense of meaning, of
Mm-hmm.
purpose, and ethics, and so on. And these are subcortical circuits. That means they're out of awareness, they're unconscious. However,
Mm-hmm.
the paradox is that they have very little connectivity to the verbal centers in the top of the brain, in the neocortex. They have much richer connectivity to actually to the gut, to the gastrointestinal tract. And so the old notion of gut feeling actually is spot on, because it's by attuning to these signals that we get that felt sense, feels right and doesn't feel right. And we can become better at, pausing, becoming mindful, getting in the habit of sensing our own feelings deeply, along with what else we're doing, because it's those feelings that are guiding us in this. And by the way, I think they probably guide us unconsciously, uh, whether or not we attune to them.
And I just want to encourage people to visit morethansound.net. The URL is right there. And you can get more information about Dan's new book and the ebook version. And there have been a couple of other recent books and ebooks and recordings that have come out on morethansound.net. So a good place to go for a follow-up to this conversation.